may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, my dudes, we are going to be talking about literally the safest option you could ever be looking at in fantasy drafts. I mean, over the past pretty much decade now, this wide receiver has hit every single season, and he's still only 29 years old. So I'm very excited to break down exactly how safe he is and how, I mean, you draft him and it's literally a guaranteed profit every single season. But before we do that, I need to give everyone a massive thank you. A few days ago on this channel, we passed 24,000 subscribers, and I promise you, we are not stopping there. With all the support y'all show on these videos, by y'all going down there and smashing that like button, literally every single video. I mean, it's over 200 likes in the first day it's uploaded. I promise you, we are hitting 100,000 subscribers this football season. I know it seems like for us that fantasy football never stops, but the people watching this video right now are just the sickos. The people watching this video at the beginning of July are just the crazy ones. I mean, we are going to get all those casual fantasy football players coming in a few months. And I promise you, with this base audience, the base people supporting the show, a part of the flock, we are going to grow to 100,000 subscribers with your support. But yeah, beyond that, thank you so much for everything y'all do. And let's just talk about DeAndre Hopkins here. And I was eventually going to make a DeAndre Hopkins video probably closer to the season, but we had actually had multiple people reaching out to us on Patreon asking about DeAndre Hopkins. And with our draft guide coming out, you are going to find that DeAndre Hopkins, of course, he's in the tier 1 of wide receivers. I mean, he's in that tier with Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, and Stephon Diggs, of guys that you really can't miss on. I mean, these are wide receivers that you can make the argument for any of them to be the wide receiver 1 overall. DeAndre Hopkins is down there at wide receiver 4, but the tiers matter way more than the actual rankings. Now, DeAndre Hopkins only 29 years old, and I will say, while yes, with some wide receivers like a T.Y. Hilton, with a Brandon Cooks, I mean, those are players that you have to start to worry about when they get to this age range, but a DeAndre Hopkins is different. Because we know the wide receivers that are going to fall off once they get to 29, 30 years old are going to be the wide receivers that win off of athleticism, the wide receivers that win off of speed. And what DeAndre Hopkins possesses is he has the best hands in the NFL, and he has elite route running, and he is amazing at the catch point, unlike any other wide receiver can be. And we know that all of those traits, there's really no reason why you should go through and speculate that those are going to fall off anytime soon. So with DeAndre Hopkins, I mean, 29 years old, this is his prime. Don't be worrying about a fall off in efficiency in the slightest. And if we go through the past 3 years for DeAndre Hopkins, I mean, it's impressive with the stability that he's had, where in 2020, he had over 18 points a game. 2019, almost 18 points. And in 2018, over 21 points a game. But I want to go through and I want to look at that 2019 season again, because that's the one season from DeAndre Hopkins over a very long stretch in his NFL career where he dips below 18 fantasy points per game. Well, that's one of the only seasons that DeAndre Hopkins missed a game at all. And what you dive into is the fact that he actually left a game early due to injury, and he only ended up playing about 20% of the snaps in that game. And if you remove that game from the sample, you actually have DeAndre Hopkins in 2019 bumping up to 18.66 fantasy points per game. So this is a wide receiver that was the wide receiver 3 in fantasy in 2018. He was the wide receiver 4 in fantasy in 2019 and the wide receiver 5 in fantasy in 2020. This guy is literally a top 5 producer every single season at the wide receiver position. It has failed to not hit that mark one time, and that was with Tom Savage at quarterback. And the reason why DeAndre Hopkins is literally just a shoo-in for this mark season after season after season is because we know the number one thing that you chase in fantasy is going to be volume. We know that targets season to season are the most correlated fantasy statistic that you can find, and they are the safest thing to bet on because we know that if you're getting targeted, fantasy points should follow unless you are a very bad NFL wide receiver. I mean, look at Deontay Johnson, but beyond that, let's focus in here with a great elite wide receiver in DeAndre Hopkins. And what is crazy is if you pull up his target totals for his entire NFL career, after his first 2 seasons, where we know your first 2 years, especially back then, he came into the NFL in 2013. I mean, you're not expecting a wide receiver to get on the field right away. You're not expecting him to play 80, 90% of the snaps. If you remove those 2 seasons for DeAndre Hopkins and you just look at year 3 of his NFL career and beyond, I mean, in year 3, 192 targets. In year 4, 151. Year 5, 173. Then 163, 150, and 160. So starting in year 3 for DeAndre Hopkins, he had 1 season where he did not hit 10 targets a game. He had 1 season where he did not hit 10 targets a game. The last season, DeAndre Hopkins did not hit 10 targets a game. LeGarrette Blount was a running back 1 in fantasy. That's how long ago that was. I mean, this is the exact wide receiver you were looking for in terms of his consistency. I mean, you go through his NFL career, and if you remove the 1 Tom Savage season, since his 3rd year breakout, you have 20.7 fantasy points a game, 20.7 again, 20.8, 17.9, and 18 fantasy points a game. Now, this is a wide receiver that we have already shown the numbers on. I mean, he is ridiculous in terms of his volume per game, as well as his fantasy points per game. But what is probably most impressive about DeAndre Hopkins is the amount of games that he plays every year. I mean, we know that at the quarterback position, you'll have a guy like Russell Wilson who will literally never miss a game in his entire NFL career. I mean, just go through and look at all those amazing starts from Eli Manning, where we know these quarterbacks are durable because they're not having to just go out and have a dead sprint every single play and then eventually lead into a collision. But at the wide receiver position, I mean, if you can get 14 games out of a wide receiver during a season, that is fantastic. You are extremely excited about it. And if you pull up the injury history for DeAndre Hopkins, I mean, he has been on so many injury reports since 2013. Now, keep in mind, maybe we fast forward this video slightly just so you don't have to listen to this long list, but I want to illustrate something here. Please stick with me. DeAndre Hopkins has showed up on injury reports with these injuries in his NFL career. 2013, a concussion, an ankle sprain. In 2014, hand contusion, ankle sprain, wrist sprain. 2015, concussion, knee contusion, hamstring strain. 2016, concussion, knee contusion, hamstring strain. 2017, hand strain, toe sprain, calf strain. 2018, ankle sprain, hamstring strain, rib sprain. 2019, nothing. 2020, neck injury. Now, if we go through and we look at how many games DeAndre Hopkins has missed in his entire NFL career, with about 20 injuries, with him popping up on the injury report, he has missed 2 games in his NFL career. He has missed 2 games since coming into the NFL in 2013. DeAndre Hopkins, not only one of the most stable wide receivers with his per game numbers, but this is someone that you can pretty much draft and know you are getting 16 weeks of wide receiver 1 production from him. And I will be the first person to admit, I was wrong on DeAndre Hopkins last year. I was worried. I thought the change in situation where he was going to the Arizona Cardinals, I thought it was not good for his value. We obviously knew that there was no really training camp last year. They had a minimal one, but nothing that's close to what they usually have. There was no preseason for any NFL team, let alone the Arizona Cardinals. And that was really having me question all those wide receivers that were changing teams, as well as it was having me question DeAndre Hopkins going from a team that really only ran 2 wide receiver sets in Houston to all of a sudden going and playing in Arizona, where they only run a 2 wide receiver set 28% of the time. I wasn't necessarily sure that the volume was going to be there. I thought it was going to take a dip because Arizona runs 3 wide receiver sets 46% of the time, and they run 4 to 5 wide receiver sets almost 20% of the time. I mean, that mark blows away the entire NFL. So when so many wide receivers are getting snaps, I naturally assumed that you were going to see the target share go down from DeAndre Hopkins, but that didn't happen. Now, the depth chart this upcoming season does look a little bit more talented, where you have DeAndre Hopkins obviously at 1, then you have AJ Green getting an $8 million contract at 2, then Christian Kirk, Rondale Moore, and Andy Isabella. So maybe it's a little bit of a different situation here, but if we dive into the wide receivers on this team, I think DeAndre Hopkins doesn't have that much to worry about, because you go over to AJ Green right now. I mean, AJ Green is getting paid $8 million, but I mean, AJ Green is a straight up bum at this point in his career. And I hate to say it because obviously AJ Green, one of the best wide receivers to ever play the game, someone that is going to be a Hall of Famer. But if you look at the efficiency fall off in 2020, it shows that AJ Green simply is not the same wide receiver after those injuries. I mean, he is 33 years old, or at least he will be this season. And if we go through his last non-injured season in 2017, there, he averaged over 7.5 yards per target. And if we compare that to what he did in 2020, I mean, you see over a 25% fall off. He comes down to a 5.0 yards per target. That is, I don't want to say the lowest in the league just because I don't have the numbers ahead of me, but I promise you, I mean, I look at yards per target numbers every day, all day, and this is having to be at the very bottom of the NFL from this past year. A 5.0 yards per target mark is horrendous for a wide receiver that is getting that much volume. And I know that he suffered some very bad quarterback play throughout the entire season, besides at the beginning when he had Joe Burrow. And if you just focus in at the beginning when Joe Burrow was the starting quarterback for Cincinnati and T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd were hyper productive, I mean, then AJ Green was still incredibly inefficient. I mean, he was the most inefficient wide receiver pretty much in the entire NFL last year. So AJ Green, I just want to look at him as a player that I want nothing to do with in fantasy. But given his $8 million and given the fact that it is AJ Green, I'm a little bit worried that he is someone that's going to be seeing snaps. So keep that in mind. Now, Christian Kirk, a wide receiver that, I mean, I love Christian Kirk coming into the NFL. I mean, out of Texas A&M, he looked like the perfect slot guy. He looked like someone that broke out at 18 years old at Texas A&M. And I thought he was going to be able to carve himself a role in an NFL roster. Well, yeah, he's gotten a role in the Cliff Kingsbury offense, but honestly, it doesn't suit Christian Kirk that well at all. I mean, he's going in to his age 24 season, so you'd expect this to be a player that is still continuing to develop. But with the addition of DeAndre Hopkins this past season, I mean, he took a massive step back in his volume. So in 2019, Christian Kirk actually saw over 8 targets a game, and I was really surprised to see that number. I thought that Christian Kirk had a much more disappointing second season in his NFL career than he actually did. But yeah, over 8 targets a game. Now, the efficiency was very bad. He had 6.6 yards per target, which obviously is not going to be ideal for a second-year wide receiver. But in 2020, the volume just falls off the earth. I mean, he goes down to 5.6 targets a game. They're using him a little bit deeper downfield, which is intriguing with Christian Kirk because, I mean, we always viewed him as a player that was going to be great in the slot, someone that could run some crossing routes, run a slant, and be someone that very intriguing in fantasy. I don't know why they are deciding to use him in a deeper role. Obviously, this team drafted Christian Kirk before Cliff Kingsbury took the job as the head coach. So maybe, I mean, Christian Kirk just isn't his guy, but still, that is notable. Now, I will say the only other wide receiver that I'd be excited about drafting this offseason alongside DeAndre Hopkins is going to be the rookie Rondale Moore. Okay, so here with Rondale Moore, you go through real quick and we can talk about why he is such an exciting wide receiver prospect. But first, of course, we need to address the elephant in the room, which is Rondale Moore is a tiny human. This is someone that's 5'7", 181 pounds, but we look beyond that. That is the one red flag besides the injuries that he had in his college career. Besides those two, I mean, Rondale Moore was a fantastic college prospect. I mean, back after his true freshman season, a lot of people that played Devy fantasy football were screaming that Rondale Moore was going to be the next Odell Beckham Jr. They were screaming that Rondale Moore was going to be a wide receiver that literally took over, came into the NFL, and was a top 10 guy right away. I mean, you would not believe the hype that Rondale Moore had. And it was because at 18 years old, keep in mind, at 18 years old, Rondale Moore came out and he had over 11 targets a game at Purdue. This is someone that also had 97 receiving yards a game, 17 rushing yards a game, and 113 total yards a game at 18 years old at Purdue. I mean, that is historic age-adjusted production in college for Rondale Moore, and you can't overlook it. Now, throw in the fact that this is a player that ran a 4.32 40-yard dash, and pretty much all of his other combine measurables were off the charts. I'm sure that everybody saw the picture of Rondale Moore with his vertical jump where it literally looks photoshopped. He looks like a human flying in the air. We have all seen his lifting videos as well. And yeah, Rondale Moore is a freak. I know a lot of people want to just look at him, say that he's 5'7", 181 pounds, and go, this is a gadget guy. But I will admit, yeah, we were worried about Rondale Moore being used as a gadget player in the NFL, at least going into the NFL draft. And what we always said is he needs to go to a team with a young offensive-minded head coach that's going to know how to use him. And I think the fit with Cliff Kingsbury is going to be perfect. Hopefully what we're going to find is Larry Fitzgerald leaving this offense opens up some slots available. They put AJ Green on the outside alongside DeAndre Hopkins, who's on the other side of the field, and then let Rondale Moore run in the slot, and that would be fantastic. And I'll say Rondale Moore not going to hurt DeAndre Hopkins at all, because Hopkins playing on the outside, Rondale Moore hopefully playing in the slot. I think this is going to be great for everyone. But thank you, my dudes. I really hope everyone enjoyed this video. Of course, if you did, go down there, drop a like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. And yeah, let me know who you're wanting me to talk about next, and I'll see y'all with the video tomorrow. I want to give a big thank you for everyone joining the flock over there on Patreon. In Castro, Brian, Mike, Jay, Samuel, Billy, Rocky, Bailey, Zachary, and Andrew. Thank you, my dudes.